You guys tuned in, and we're gonna figure out what is in this mystery box, how we made it, what we use it for, and then finally use it for its purpose. So let's get started and open this thing up. So to recap from last week's video, this is a damp box, and it's just a plastic container with a plaster slab that is hydrated with water, and whatever's inside of the bin can stay hydrated for prolonged periods of time. This specific box has been opened back in 2021, so the last time it was opened was 2021, and I made the pieces that are in there in 2020. So they are 5 years old, they've been sitting in this box, and there are interesting things growing on it. So let's go ahead and open it up and see what we have. So in the last video, I also gave away what these are. These are pre-made thrown chucks that I left in here. They're not fired. They're still in the workable clay condition. And you can see that some of them, or this one in particular, has some green stuff growing on it. And that's a combination of algae and mold. You can also see that inside of the container. So after this video, I'm going to clean this container, scrub the green stuff off, let the plaster dry out completely, and then put it back in and rehydrate so I have a nice, clean, damp box moving forward. And let's talk about these guys. So these were thrown on the wheel 5 years ago in 2020. And I throw them like you would a normal chuck that you would fire. The only difference is I keep these suspended in this state so that it remains sticky, and that pieces that go inside of it will need less things to secure it. And now the green stuff growing on it is a combination of algae and mold. And there's a debate online and in various pottery communities that say mold and algae tend to help the clay, and it makes it more plastic, more stretchable, more malleable. But in general, it's still mold or algae. And so because I have asthma, I personally don't really like working with this type of material that grows on it. So I usually scratch it off, usually outside with gloves. So I get rid of all that green stuff. And this one I trimmed away the excess after I scratched it so it looks much cleaner. And I don't really like it on here. Some people don't really care, but it does have a smell to it. Kind of has like a musty smell. So if you're a little wary about this, I would recommend removing it. And the way to prevent this from growing is don't leave it in a box for 4 years straight. Don't put it in the sun because that promotes growth. And then you want to take the pieces out periodically to like remove anything that may start growing. So I didn't do that. I left it in for 4 years, so I had a lot more green stuff. So imagine this green patch, but everywhere on both the pieces. You can kind of see it on the inside. It's still quite a bit. But anyway, I have two different pieces. And the benefit of having two different are they're modular. You can basically stack one inside of the other so that you can trim pieces that have a longer neck or that may just be too tall to fit in here upside down. We want to trim this, but before we can do it, we need to make a chuck that's tall enough that it can fit this whole piece. Now, if we were to take the two chucks and put it together and then flip our piece inside, we would be able to trim these. However, making modular chucks and then centering them is not the most beginner friendly. So instead, I'm just gonna make one big solid chuck, and then we're gonna use that to trim this piece. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way, and we're gonna get our clay to make our chuck. So I have 3 pounds of clay that I'm gonna make this chuck into. And we want it to be that kind of hourglass shape, and we want the chuck to more or less rest around this part of the piece so that we can still see the rest of this area when we trim. So I'm going to have this on the side as my reference because I'm going to be able to flip this upside down into here every so often. So making a chuck, the only difference when you make a chuck is you have to dig your hole all the way down to the bat. And so that can pose some issues for first timers trying it. So I'll give some tips and tricks on how best to do it. But the beginning parts are all the same. Center and dig your well. And then a few things when we make this chuck. We're going to want to try to keep our walls on the thicker side, 1/2 inch if possible. That way, if we need to ever adjust the chuck, trim it, remove some clay, it still has extra to play around with after some things are removed. So centering is all the same, cone up, cone down, get it stuck, and then Base wise, it's good to have different size base in the rim, because then that way you can flip the chuck over and use the top or the bottom based on what you're making. So we got our centered. Let's dig our well. And so a few things that I've noticed when you do dig your well and you go all the way down to the base, sometimes that can cause the piece to get a little unstable as you open. So if you try it and your whole piece gets uncentered as you dig your well completely, then I recommend leaving a little clay at the bottom, and we cut it away after. But anyway, there, I dug it all the way to the bottom, and now I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And as I open, I'm doing it really slowly, so I'm pulling the clay to me very slowly because I don't want the center to get off, because it is really easy now that there's no clay at the bottom. And we're going to go ahead and start the pool. And like I said, we're going to keep this clay fairly thick, so about 1/2 inch. And I already have that kind of hourglass shape, which is good, but I want to get a little narrower at the bottom, and that way I have more clay to work with vertically up. If you want to see more ceramic videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps grow the channel, and you'll be able to see these videos as they're released every week. And then I know it's a little too wide for what I need it, the purpose, so I'm going to go ahead and close this up just a tad bit. And then my base, by looking at the thickness, it looks like it's about 2-3 inches wide, about 2.5. So I'm going to go ahead and thin that out a little bit. And now you can see my whole piece getting thrown off a little. It's a little off center. So I'm going to do that Kamehameha collar technique to get it narrower at the base and to hopefully recenter. So leave my hands there for a few seconds, let the clay catch up to my movements, and then go all the way up. And then I'm going to do another pull. This time I'm going to push out from the inside a little more, and I'm going to push in from the outside. And I'm going to go ahead and then pull this up. And right around here, that should be tall enough. But I know the opening is probably too wide, so I'm going to need to make it a little narrower. So going back to that collaring that we've done before in the previous videos, collar the middle section, and then bring it up. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my hands, and I want to see how that piece fits. If it looks good, we're going to go ahead and then kind of straighten this out so it's not so wonky, and then we can go ahead and dry it out, cut it off, trim this to make it nice, and then use it for our chuck. All right, so moment of truth. Let's get our bottle vase. First thing is we're going to do the side comparison, and it looks like it could work, but I think it needs to be a little taller. So just to be safe, we're going to pull this up a little more, get it a little narrower, and then get this tighter too. So I'm shifting a little bit so you can see my hands a little better for placement in terms of the pulls. And most chucks, you really don't need that much taller than this when you're beginning, but because mine has a really long neck, I'm going to have to adjust it. So I'm going to do one more pull at the bottom, because that is still fairly thick. And hopefully it straightens out the clay wall. Then I'm really pushing that pull inward so you can see it getting narrower. And then I'm gently letting it expand as I get upwards. So when you do pulls, you can have it help you shape at the same time once you get a little more confident. And the rim's a little too wide, so let's kind of bring that in just a tad bit. And then flare out just the top. So the cool thing about these chucks are, as long as you keep them hydrated, you can keep reusing them over and over again. And when they are a little too big or too small for your purpose, you can trim the rim if you need. You can get it wet and reshape it. So these are really useful. And if you ever want to make them permanent, you can always just fire them. So I just tested it off camera, and it's still a little too short. So we're gonna have to do another pull. So one more time. This time I'm not changing the bottom shape, I'm just trying to get more clay from the inner wall. make this top section a little narrower, because this is the part that's not really fitting. So I'll make the middle section narrower and the top. And because this is such a particular and specific size, once I'm done with it, like I said before, I'm probably going to change the shape a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and see if it fits. This time I didn't want to wash my hands, so moment of truth. All right, looks like it fits. So what we're going to do, we're going to prep this to get it cut off, dry it a little bit, and then we're going to be able to trim our piece. So the first thing I want to do is the rim. In the camera, you can see that the rim is not completely level, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that just a little bit. The inside wall feels pretty flat, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut this and as little bit as possible. So I'm taking my needle, pushing it in at 3 o'clock, and then my left pointer finger is there to catch it. There we go. That looks a lot more symmetrical. Around the rim. And the only thing I would really need to mess around with is the bottom for trimming, but I'm still going to help that process out. And so I'm going to go ahead and then just cut, follow the same angle that I have. I'm just going to go ahead and cut down to the wheel, take my needle, slide it underneath. So I cut that off and then peel the whole thing away. And lastly, just clean up the bat. Reintroduce a groove at the bottom. And then we're going to wire it off, dry it out, trim a little bit of it, and then we're going to go ahead and use this to trim our bottle vase. And I forgot to take the water out from the inside, so as I cut it through, the water got underneath and it slid, so it's got a little wonky. I'm gonna have to adjust that shape after it dries a little more. So don't do what I did, take the water out first and then cut. So let's go ahead and let this dry out, and we'll go ahead and trim it after it's a little more ready to trim. All right, so the piece has dried out enough. I used a torch to dry it, and I flipped it upside down, so this is the bottom. And so I'm going to go ahead and then center it so I can trim this and make it a little more even, and then we can go ahead and start using this to trim our piece. So when I center this, I'm centering it based on the rim, because that is the part that was the most centered, not the bottom. So I'm going to switch positions, and I'm going to get the camera to aim right here so you can see how I center it based on this rim. This is my 3 o'clock. I normally sit right here, but I switched positions so it's easier to see on the camera. I'm going to use the concentric rings to center my piece. So I'm going to take this and center it as close as possible using the rings as my reference, and then I'm going to spin the wheel. And I'm going to put my finger here. So this would be your 6 o'clock when you do this. So every time the piece gets closest to my finger, that is the point that is the most off center. So I'm going to stop the wheel when it hits that point. It's right there, right there, right there. And then I'm going to take my fingers and push it away from me, just a tad bit, and then spin again. And I'm going to keep doing that until this more or less looks centered, and that looks pretty good. My fingers not really going in and out compared to the piece, so that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and change the camera angle again so we can trim the top. So just to recap, that last camera angle might have been confusing. This is my normal 6 o'clock. I shifted so I was sitting here. So this was my 6 o'clock in that other frame. But anyway, it's centered. And now I'm going to go ahead and adjust this. You can see in the camera it's kind of wobbling. It's not the most center. So the first thing I want to do is to spin the wheel and then tap it down, because I don't want this shifting on me. And there was some tackiness from the rim that helped it get stuck, so that I know that it won't move on me. Okay, then the first thing I'm going to do is take my needle and I'm going to cut off this excess that I don't need. I'm just going to hold it and push down until it cuts all the way through. Peel that away. And there's a slight overhang here, so I'm going to trim that away. And I still want to trim rather lightly because there's nothing securing it besides the tackiness of the clay and some moisture. You could put wads if you want, but I just want to do this quickly so I can trim my piece. So I'm just going to take my trimming tool and just remove this little excess that I don't need, this overhang. And this bottom section is still pretty wet, so I'm trying to pull it off as I trim. You can see it on my fingers, it's very tacky still. And so I torched this piece earlier and it didn't really dry the bottom inside very much. So I'm just making sure to remove that excess, and I can clean that up a little more. So I can use my sponge still because the clay is still fairly wet. And I can use that to kind of tidy up the rest, and my fingers to finish. And I'm not too worried about this unevenness here. If in the future I'm using this to trim, by putting a piece this way, I can trim and adjust this later. But I'm just trying to get this level and this edge clean. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim this outside, and I'm just removing these bumps that I don't want, and that's pretty much it. I don't want to remove too much because, like I said, this is a wet clay, and if I ever want to adjust it, I can rehydrate with water and then pull this open if I need to. So by keeping it thicker, I can adjust it in the future if I need. All right, so that looks good. Now to pop it off, I want to make sure that this doesn't change shape. So I want to make sure not to pull it or try to use too much force. So I put my hands at the base and I kind of just jiggle until it releases. So it's sliding, and then I can pop it off. And now I flip it right side up. I would center it this direction. You can see the little moisture on the rim from the clay. I'll center it this way, so this would be centered. And then I'll take my bottleneck vase, flip that upside down, and then I would center this based on everything. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in the next video because I know this one was rather long, and we're going to finally finish the series of the bottleneck, collaring, and chuck making. And until then, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.